because, I mean, another thing people don't talk about, and like when they did the 20-year documentary where Bush was in it, Chaney was in it, everyone was in it on Apple this past year for September 11th, you know, there's more than credible evidence. It's kind of obvious that Dick Cheney broke the ultimate law on September 11th. He ordered the shooting down of a civilian jet if it was coming towards Washington, D.C. And they asked him, because the president was not incapacitated. He was in Air Force One. So the vice president is not acting president right now.
Right.
And they said, is this a presidential order? And he like, without saying it, kind of like Aaron Rodgers was like, I've been immunized.
Yeah.
he did the same. I've been presidentialized or like something,
right.
like, and he hadn't been. He should have been out of office right there, and he wasn't.
When he ordered the shoot down of a commercial jet if it was flying towards the White House?
If it was flying towards, I think he gave whatever the military go-ahead was, and people please Google this to check this out exactly what it was, but he gave the military go-ahead, I believe, for the fighter jets that were in the sky to actively shoot down a civilian jet that wouldn't respond or something to Air Force control.
Right.
And that's, you know, and it sounds, even for him, it was a heavy thing, but like he gave the order.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And he wasn't allowed to do that.
I've never heard that.
Yeah. And like they talk about it openly. Like,
see, what I heard was, especially in that 9/11 documentary, they talk about how he gave specifically an order to not shoot down the jet that was coming towards the Pentagon. The jet that was coming towards the Pentagon did some crazy big loop, and it was not communicating VFR for like a long time, and they knew something was fishy with that plane, with the flight that it was taking, the flight path that it was taking. And there was a communication with the guy that was under Chaney, who they were in some sort of like a command room, and they talk about the kid. He was a kid at the time. He keeps coming into the command room where Chaney was in. He goes, "Sir, the plane is 50 miles out," and he's like, "Okay, stand by." So the kid goes back in the other room. He comes back, you know.
About the Pentagon plane.
About the Pentagon.
77.
Listen to the audio.
Yeah, then he's like, okay, the plane is 30 miles out. Does the order still stand? He's like, yes. The kid disappears. Comes, and this is all recorded. And this whole situation was talked about like during the 9/11 commission and like in front of Congress and or all that kind of shit. Like they really interviewed the guy that was in the room, and he talked about it, and he changed his story. And he comes in again. He's like, okay, the plane is 10 miles out. Does the order still stand, sir? Does the order still stand? Like, he was like panicking, visually like sweating. And Dick Cheney was like, yes, the order still stands. Like barked, like yelled at him, and never ordered to have the plane shot down or anything like that. Like there was an order to not have the plane shot down.
Now, I have to see this. I have not seen this documentary. I still have to watch this. But off the top of my head, there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
off
yeah.
the top of my head,
I'm loosely paraphrasing what was happening, but that was the gist of it.
I believe this could be a situation. It could be. I don't know. I have to see it. Where they are where they're changing the context, because I believe the context was this is all recorded, and he was saying this about the jet that was approaching, like that you have the order to shoot it down if it gets closer, and then it never came to that because something happened in Shanksville. They took it down, right? The people took it down. Like they turned the plane boop, right down into the ground. Unless, conspiracy hat on, it did get shot down. We just never admitted that.
In this documentary, they basically tried to prove that that plane that came down in Pennsylvania in that big open field, that was shot down by
that
by
would
a jet.
be very, very hard to cover up. That would be so. Now look, it's been done before. You can ask Jim about TWA 800. You should ask him about that.
Is that what that flight? That
96.
Flight? Okay.
The one that blew up. He was on that investigation. I believe his job was, one of his main jobs was to interview all the expert pilots that they could get their hands on and run through every scenario, and every single pilot to a T told him it got shot down. And that's not what the official story was. So it's not like this hasn't happened, but I believe that was like over the ocean or something, maybe. I'm not sure about that. I have to check that. But
We're talking about the same plane, right?
that was TWA 800 in 1996, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Okay.
So-
I was talking about the one on September 11th.
I know.
Okay.
So I'm coming back to September 11th
Okay.
now. This was overland.
Right.
Now, best possible type of area for least amount of people is a more rural area. But it was overland.
Mm-hmm.
They'd have to cover every witness there and get them quiet in an open society. You know, there's shit that happens, but like this is still an open society. There were cameras everywhere. The media would have had to be in on it, period. Which, you know, some cynics would say, well, that's not hard. But this was a different time. You know, and the power of the media was not as what the internet wasn't the thing. Like it wasn't as coordinated. It didn't have the ability to be at the time. Right. So like, furthermore, the evidence on the ground, like there's so much that has to be there. But like, here's what I always say with the 9/11 thing. And again, I gotta watch the one you tell me. But I think we have been so fucked over 6 ways to Sunday over the last 20 years in a way that our nation hasn't been fucked over since the Great Depression, and before that, the Civil War, and before that, the Revolutionary War. That, of course, naturally, we all turn to things to try to make sense of it and speak truth to power and call out where bad things happen, which we should do, by the way. That's a positive trait. I try to live like here, though, where I listen to a guy like Andrew, who I think has the right intentions, and obviously smart guy, talented guy, and I try to listen with a critical ear and a grain of salt, and a guy like Jim, too, you know, and also try to hear where there's truth, where there's not bias, right? There's some things where there's not. With September 11th, I think one of the things that we got to remember is that, like everything that's complicated, which is most things in this world, there's a lot of things that are true at the same time. So it can be true that planes flew into buildings and the people who were in power might have been horrified at, you know, that day and what happened, but they took advantage of it. They did a whole bunch of shit that they had, you know, deep state, had wanted to do for a long time.
Right.
Caused ground-altering precedents to happen that we have to live with today, and we've seen all the tentacle after effects of this. At the same time, and this part is true, this is confirmed. You ever seen The Looming Tower?
No.
Okay, this was a book, and then it was a 10-part miniseries on Hulu, like 5 years ago.
I think I watched the first episode.
All right, phenomenal.
Okay.
So this is true. The FBI and the CIA did not get along.
Right, right.
Right? So part of the reason I look at it, I'm like, not an inside job, is because we do have a record. The CIA, Cofer Black, and another guy who has a fake name because he's undercover to this day with the CIA, went to the White House on, I think it was July 6th, 2001. It was sometime in July, 2 months before. We have the minutes. We have the write-up. They're saying they're coming here. It's happening.
Right.
They knew it. The problem was Alex Station, which was the bin Laden unit at the CIA, would meet with the counterterrorism FBI unit, the National Security Advisor, I think his name was Richard or William Clark, something like that, and some of the generals every week in Washington to share information. And the guy who represented the FBI was a guy named John O'Neill, who is the basis of the Looming Tower. You can ask Jim about him. He didn't have the greatest reputation because he was a ladies' man. He had like 3 wives at the same time. It was kind of interesting. Like, guy of the night, brash, didn't give a shit about anyone but himself. But he was a pretty good agent. But he was a cop. Like, he wanted the arrest. How does CIA operate? They want information. They see a guy that they get in, and they don't want to put handcuffs on him. They want to say, we got you 6 ways to Sunday. You work for us now.
Yeah.
Right? And now they get to a bigger fish.
Right.
So naturally, John O'Neill, CIA, didn't get along. So the CIA, and we know this is a fact, the CIA did not share a lot of information with the FBI, including when some of these targets entered America, which, and righteously so, this is where you will get people to come in and be like, they made it happen and all that.
Right.
The thing is, so many things had to go right that day that they would have never left out of their control. Like, these guys had to successfully get through every level of security where we know they had a couple close calls. We know for a fact that the guy up in Maine on the initial flight at 6 a.m. almost stopped Mohammed Atta and didn't let him on the jet. CIA would have never let that happen. Like, this would have been like, oh yeah, these guys are going right through.
Right.
They would have had their own stand-in there at the TSA. And then, you know, we saw the planes go in. The one people always talk about is the Pentagon, because there's only one weird, you know, 140 pixel footage
and you
of
can't
it.
even really see a plane.
Right. But, you know, we saw, my favorite people are the ones who are like, those weren't planes going into Twin Towers. Like, dude, we have a trillion angles of it. I'll show you.
They're definitely planes.
It was a plane. Right? So all these things can be true at the same time. And then the government, the bad actors in the government, in which case I would argue the people in power, that was some of the most corrupt inside government we've ever had at one time, I think, at least of what we know in history. You look at Chaney, you look at Rumsfeld, you look at all these guys, right? They took advantage of it, and then they made money off it. They went to Iraq. It wasn't good enough to go to Afghanistan.
Right.
You know, we did a great job in Afghanistan for 5 minutes before, you know, without getting bin Laden. That was the one thing that sucked, you know, for like symbolism purposes. We eventually got him. But then, you know, one thing Obama said that he was spot on about is he's like, we took our eye off the ball. Now, it's easy to say that 7 years later, you know, politically easy to say, but it's true. We started focusing on Iraq.
Right.
And now look what happened with Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's really sad. Like, you know, there's some extremists there, but then there's a lot of innocent people who were caught in the middle of this, who were never given a chance. Once we did go in there, it's like, well, now they can be liberated. They can go to school. They don't have to live in this crazy society. And we allowed a power vacuum to form because we took away our resources from there. And we sent him somewhere for, you know, Bush wanted to finish his dad's job, or I don't know what the fuck, who knows. Right. But a lot of things can be true at the same time. And I just always try to keep that in mind. So, like, I'll look at something like that because I'm always curious.